their places on stage, they'll be coming up. I want you to meet Illy Pete, a friend and colleague of mine. She's the principal of Catalyze and Cultivate Consulting, an award-winning professional and author who will moderate our conversation today. She's a member of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Silicon Valley chapter, one of our partners today, as well as a leadership strategist, executive coach, and facilitator. Should you need one, she's amazing, I will vouch for her. And with nearly 30 years of crossover sector experience. Born in Tennessee, is this okay if I say this, Illy? Okay, you haven't crossed it off, so I left it. But born in Tennessee, her parents were among the first Black students at their university. Their experience was not easy. And they participated in the civil rights movement. Ilyasha Pete, MBA, welcome to the stage, and thank you for your help today.
Thank you so much, Laura. Amazing, and I appreciate the words. Before I'm going to go jump off script, I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to start by saying, who learned something they didn't know today? And I'm in church, so I'm not going to say what I want to say. But who's a little angry about some of the things they learned today? That's why we're here. That's why we're here. And I want to repeat the words that were said at the end. Yes, we will. That's why we're here. Yes, we will. And we deserve this democracy. Before we move on any further, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Has Gail made it or no?
I don't see Gail.
Okay. So I want to introduce Dr. Claiborne Carlson. He has devoted his professional life to the study of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King and the human rights movements he led. He was chosen by Coretta Scott King in 1985 to preserve, edit, and publish her late husband's papers. Widely known for his contribution to the documentaries relating to the freedom movement. He is the founder of World House Project, an innovative and inspired by Dr. King's vision of a world where humanity learns to live together in peace. Born in Buffalo, educated at UCLA, and a professor at Stanford for over 40 years, his life work was catalyzed when he attended the 1963 March on Washington for the jobs and freedom. Let's welcome him. And thanks so much for your work and your service. Next, we have Lisa Ratner. And she will speak about the threats to voting rights facing us in California, especially Prop 39, a voter ID initiative on the November ballot. The president of the League of Women of Voters in Palo Alto, she also serves as a key role as an advocacy chair since 2017. Her board service, both past and present, includes Alto Housing and Palo Alto Children's Theater. She received her law degree at UC Davis and worked in public interest in Alaska, and employment and labor and higher education law in Los Angeles. Let's welcome her as well. So I'm going to introduce Gail in case she comes in, just so you'll know who she is. She's our third speaker, Gail Slocum, who will share about how we can help protect voting rights from now till November the 3rd. She serves as the chief counsel at PG&E with 37 years of experience in management, policy, and legal positions in the field of energy, environment, climate policy, and sustainable land use. A law school graduate of UC Berkeley, she served as the mayor of Menlo Park, the planning commission chair for the county of San Mateo, and had leadership positions in various nonprofit and community organizations, as well as numerous political and policy change campaigns. All right, Dr. Carlson, I'm ready if you are. I'm a native of Memphis, Tennessee. So what I saw, my parents lived and they were part of the story. They were part of the fight. And so that hit me much harder than maybe some of you. My first question is, when we tell the story of voting rights and the voting rights movements, whose contributions have been overlooked?
I'm thinking of some of the people who were in the story today, yeah. Joan Bland is an old friend of mine, and she's told me the story of what she suffered to get the right to vote. She was beaten on the bridge, and you begin to understand the value when you're in a place like Selma, and you understand that people had to suffer in order to get the right to vote. And in fact, one of the most important events, which I invite all of you to someday attend, is they still have an annual march across the bridge. And I hope, raise your hand if you, none of you have ever been on it?
We've been to the bridge.
Oh, great, great.
Okay,
It's good.
it's impressive.
It's good that people are keeping that alive, and I remember sometimes we had thousands of people there, sometimes less, but it was always the local people there who wanted to keep that story alive. And Joan Bland is just a phenomenal person. She was the one, just an anecdote. She took me over to the Selma Cemetery. And if some of you have been there, you know the story I'm about to tell, because you walk in, you see this big tombstone. It's a tombstone to a Confederate general. And it highlights everything there. No black person was allowed to be buried there. Of course, no black person would probably want to be buried there. But it was, you could tell that this was something that continues to this day. They continue that fight. Joanne, last time I talked with her, she's still there. She still goes to that cemetery and sees that monument to the Confederate general when you walk in. But she has continued the battle. So I'm so happy to have known her, and I hope she's doing well. But she's such a pioneer.
As many women were, and I think our stories have not been shared maybe as they should have. And I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. If those women were here today, the women that you talked about, learned about, been with, if they were here today, what would they tell us?
That the struggle is still going on. I think one of the things about using terms like the civil rights movement is that it kind of makes this assumption that it had a beginning and it had an end. And I just think it depends on where you're thinking about that. And I think anyone who turns on the evening news every night knows that it hasn't ended. It still goes on. And I think that's one of the things that you begin to understand when you go to a place like Selma, is that, and it's not just the struggle for the vote, but it's the struggle to even register. People had their heads beat in order to go in and demand their rights. So all these struggles are important because they're still going on. We tend to forget that. I think that's one of the things about even using a term like the civil rights movement. It puts it in the past, and I prefer a human rights struggle. When I look at King's last book, it says, where do we go from here? And, you know, he's talking about 1968. So that's where we're going to start. And I tell my students that when I used to teach them at Stanford, I said, when was the largest student protest in the history of Stanford? And you know, I think, oh, wasn't that back in the 60s, people sitting in and all that kind of stuff? No, it wasn't. It was an anti-apartheid struggle in the 1980s. So that drew far more people. I think about 500 people were arrested in the president's office there. And there was nothing comparable to that earlier. And it just shows how the movement grew into something that was larger than simply the civil rights movement in the United States. And I think we're still there. I think we're still looking at it. King's last book, where we go from here, it's chaos or community. Where's the community? Where's the global community? What are we doing to build it? And we, you know, I think we've kind of dropped the ball in some ways in terms of making that a priority. I think that King, in the end, understood that. That was one of the reasons why it's unfortunate, obviously, that he died at an early age. So the question that those of us who are over 39 need to ask is, if he did all that by the time he was 39, what next? Where was he heading? And we know from his writings exactly where he was heading. He was heading toward a global community. He would have been involved in the anti-apartheid movement. He was involved in the anti-apartheid movement, by the way. People forget about those sorts of things. So I think that he would understand probably as much as some of you that the struggle continues. It hasn't. We need to take a breath sometime, but it's a long-term struggle. And at the heart of it is the right to vote, to be represented. But that's only one aspect of it. And I also wanted to, you know, just really emphasize, make it global. Try as best you can to make global connections. There are important, well, one way I would visualize that for you. In the 1980s, I was invited to go to Zambia as the guest of the government. I went there, and I said, you have to run the country for a month, and enjoyed it a great deal, and then it was like, why? And I said, because we gained our independence as a country in 1964. It was because of the civil rights movement in the United States that we were able to gain our independence as a nation. So we're thanking, through you, we're thanking those who were protesting at that time. And you know, that was one of the most, still to this day, you know, my brother Chris is here, and he's probably seen it, but my bedroom today has material from Zambia. It's my favorite country in the world. And it's because they paid it back. We did something in terms of the movement. Probably most people in the movement didn't even recognize that the recognition of the Zambian government was even in the air. But they knew, and they knew that the climate would not have been prepared for that, if not for the struggle in the United States.
So you said, what is next? My question to you all is, who is next? Is it you?
Oh, okay,
Having trouble hearing you in the back.
okay.
Sorry about that.
And I'm actually gonna move to, Lisa, and what you're gonna talk about, bring us to the present. We're gonna talk about the past, and I'm gonna bring us to the present. And my question, again, you're the president, of the league and advocacy chair. You've been studying ballots for many years. What should Californians understand about today's voting rights landscape and the threats that it poses?
Yeah, thank you. So the voter suppression tactics allowed under the Supreme Court's 2013 Shelby decision, they continue today across the country because federal preclearance is gone. And just this year, the Supreme Court further eroded voting rights in its Calais decision by making it difficult to challenge racially discriminatory legislative maps. Threats to voting rights in California come in the form of Prop 39, a dangerous voter ID initiative on the November ballot. The League of Women Voters of California has joined a broad coalition of civil rights and community organizations to defeat Prop 39. This initiative would impose sweeping new restrictions on how every Californian casts their ballot, targeting communities that already face significant obstacles to voting. So what does Prop 39 do? Prop 39 requires a government-issued ID every time you vote in person, with no clear exception for people who do not have one. It requires every mail-in voter, to write the last 4 digits of a government ID number on the outside of the return mail ballot envelope. That ID would likely be a social security number or a driver's license, right next to your name and your address. This is sensitive personal data. Prop 39 forces election officials to run voters through an unreliable federal citizenship database to verify citizenship. It lets anyone sue state or county officials for compliance. And it will cost millions of taxpayer dollars to implement. Prop 39 is built on a lie that voter impersonation and non-citizen voting are problems. The reality is, as the documentary showed, non-citizen voting is very rare, and there's no data showing that voter impersonation even happens. Numerous studies from the Brennan Center to the Cato Institute to the Bipartisan Policy Center confirm that voter impersonation and non-citizen voting are exceedingly rare. An analysis by the Conservative Heritage Foundation own database found only 77 documented instances of non-citizen voting in over 20 years. This is out of billions of votes cast. California already verifies voters at every stage. Our ID is matched when we register to vote. Our social security number, driver's license, and signatures are matched with government databases. Voters sign a statement under penalty of perjury that they are citizens. We have a roster sign-in at the polls where the voter provides their signature and address, and this information is matched with existing government registration data. We have signature verification on every mail ballot, obstacle scanning and review by election officials, with an opportunity for unmatched signatures to be cured by the voter. And this curing process is what led to a significant delay in the primary. What are the problems with Prop 39? First, would you write the last 4 digits of your social security number on the outside of an envelope with your name and address and signature right next to it, and then drop it in the mail? This clearly raises identity theft issues. When Texas imposed a similar mail ballot ID rule, roughly 1 in 8 ballots were rejected for things like blank fields and transposed digits, not because of ineligibility. Scale that to California, and you have millions of ballots rejected. And the burden of these requirements will fall unevenly on people of color, on young people, on non-driving seniors, and people with disabilities who are less likely to have a qualifying ID. And even if a free ID is part of the package, it's never free. It costs time off work, transportation, and fees for underlying documents. This is a modern-day poll tax. And the cost to the taxpayers for election officials to run voters through an unnecessary and unreliable citizen database will be in the tens of millions of dollars. Good news is that education works. When voters hear about what the voter ID measure would actually do, we see support for it collapsing. The League of Women Voters of California, the ACLU of Northern and Southern California, Disability Rights and Common Cause have a campaign in California against Prop 39, but anticipate significant spending from the other side. And it is an uphill climb to get this message to voters. So our message to you today is, please help us get out the message to your friends and neighbors. Sign up on the table back there behind you before you leave here if you might be interested in holding a neighborhood What's on Your Ballot meeting about the last week in September in your neighborhood, just before people receive their mail ballots, which will be mailed out on August 4th, I think, or 3rd. This neighborhood meeting will be a good way to get to know your neighbors and to discuss the ballot initiatives, including informing them about Prop 39. And the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto plans to help you with a What's on Your Ballot kit. So be sure to give us your contact information on the sign-up sheet back there.
So what I'm gonna go back and kind of piggyback on something that you said. Last year at a AFP event, I heard a teacher say democracy runs through the classroom. And you talked about education of adults. What do you think about educating even younger than that, so that when they get to the point where they can vote, they're ready and they know the responsibility that's surrounding it?
Yes, League of Women Voters is very concerned with educating young voters. We have a high school registration program. It's one of our major efforts around the country. I think when Laura and I actually met with Dr. Carson in June to get to know him, at least for me to get to know him, and Laura already knew him, but he mentioned that he was very concerned with voting because he got government services from the government, medical care, for example. But he mentioned that younger people who don't interact with government services that often have a difficult time imagining why their vote matters. So I think voter education is important, in which we talk about what your vote will accomplish. In the same way as the Joan Bland in the movie said, if she had the vote, then maybe her mother would have gotten a blood transfusion. Maybe segregation in Selma would not have happened. Her mother would have lived if black people had had the vote back in 1967 when her mother died in that segregated hospital. So having the vote has a very important impact on how we live our lives, and I think it is the responsibility of us as adults and the school system in the state of California to make sure that young people do know why it's important to vote.
So I'm gonna ask this to both of you. Got two questions that I'm gonna ask. The first is, what can ordinary people do to protect voting rights? Does anyone have a thought on that?
You know, first of all, make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you know how to do that. We have some material back on the table in our League of Women Voters materials section, which will help you contact the Secretary of State and the Registrar of Voters to check on your voter registration. Ask your friends and neighbors, ask your grown-up children to check on whether their voter registration is current. One of the things that our third speaker, who for some reason is not here, Gail Slocum, was going to talk about, was the kinds of things people can do in California and in other states through the Election Protection Coalition to assist people in making sure that they're able to vote. And one of the things the Election Protection Coalition does is put you in contact with voters here in California and voters in other states, and to have a conversation with them before the final election day, to ask them to check their voter registration, to give them the information that's needed to make that check. If they don't have the proper ID for their particular state, election protection volunteers can put people in contact with Vote Riders, who is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to getting people those IDs that were discussed in the documentary. They even have money set aside to help people with the documentary fees. Another thing that the election protection volunteers will do is actually go and be a poll watcher in another state. Imagine being a poll worker in Atlanta, or maybe Milwaukee, or any of those states where voter suppression led to a different outcome in 2016 than that probably would have happened if the Supreme Court had not issued its 2013 decision making federal pre-clearance of voter suppression tactics not possible anymore. So I think that there are many things that we can do personally to help. As I said, one of them is to make sure you and your friends and your neighbors are registered to vote. Make sure you know what's on the ballot. And then go and take a look at the election protection website and see if you might sign up to do some work there. Apparently you can do some of that work from the comfort of your own home. You don't actually have to go to another state to call somebody in Michigan or Atlanta, Georgia. So those are some of the things I would suggest.
Dr. Carlson, do you have anything to add?
I just think it's a matter of education at every level about how important it is.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure, I mean, one of the things that was very helpful was lowering the voting age. And yet I don't think a number of people that age are voting. And part is because the motivation to vote is probably less. And we need to, really inform them of how important it is.
And the
How
blood,
many-
sweat, and tears that went into
Yeah,
getting the right
exactly.
to vote.
Yeah, I mean, Joanne Bland will probably vote every opportunity.
Yeah.
I was going to joke, vote twice if you have.
Don't let them hear you say that. So my question before we move on to the questions that have been provided by the audience members, heard a lot today about the threats that are looming. What gives you hope? Why are you here? What gives you hope?
I'm hopeful, number one, because the legislature in California is moving forward with something called the California Voting Rights Act of 2026, which seeks to put into California exactly those voting rights that had been put on hold by the Supreme Court. So we will probably have pre-clearance in California. We will probably have language minority access to ballots under the California Voting Rights Act. We will probably not be too affected by the Calais decision, which threw into question the illegality of racial gerrymandering. So the California Voting Rights Act of 2026 is currently in the Assembly, and the League of Women Voters is urging everybody to contact their local representatives and have them vote for the update of the California Voting Rights Act. There's another bill in Congress, which has been introduced a number of times since 2020, and that is to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would also restore federal pre-clearance and adopt other voting protections that have been significantly weakened by the Supreme Court. In order for the Congress to pass that bill, which is passed, I think, several times by the House, but has never gotten passed by the Senate, we will have to vote in the November elections and also in 2028 to change Congress so that it will pass.
Okay.
That gives me hope.
Dr. Carlson, what gives you hope?
I just think that in the end, it really comes down to our younger people informed about what other people went through to get the right to vote. I think it's so important to kind of keep those stories alive. I mean, the Joan Blands are, to me, the heroes of this story. You know, she was beaten on Pettus Bridge as a teenager, and has gone back there every single year since then to march across that bridge. And, you know, that's the kind of story that, you know, I think people can be inspired by. And it's, and also, I think having candidates worth voting for.
Say it again, louder for the back, louder for the people in the back.
You assume that elections in places like California don't have any civil rights implications. And I think that's just erroneous. You know, every time you vote, you're making a political choice, and it has a political impact, or it can have a political impact. And I think that that's where we are today, is trying to remind people that, you know, this is not insignificant to think of the, you know, what could happen in California, and just in terms of people realizing it's so important and it's so easy here. I mean, we used to, I don't know if we still do, but we used to be able to go down to a church and vote. It was very easy. I didn't even have to go we could walk there. I don't know if it's still that easy in California. Okay, yeah, I mean, it's if you can't vote in California, you can't vote anyplace.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we're going to have some questions from the audience. If you have other questions, write them on the paper and give them to Ms. Laura. She will pick them up. This question is for Lisa, but Dr. Carlson, if you have any thoughts, I'm sure you can follow up. What reforms should we be exploring locally to make sure our democracy is more representative and ensures voters feel their participation actually matters? That was given by Gabby from the Latina Coalition.
I think events like this, you know, where you show what happened before, and you know, that history can't get lost, and you know, people are still around, like Joanne, who went through that. I mean, she was a young person, but she's still in the struggle in Selma. And I think that that's one of the things that is, at least my impression from the time, of all the places I've been invited, Alabama's been very kind to me. I was invited to come there and speak, and I find that the people there want that history. And they understand that this was history where they were at the center of attention. And sometimes they have to remind young people of that
Yeah,
as they're growing up.
fair enough.
Is that part of the history lessons that they learn in school?
That are not part of the history lessons they learn in school. Is that what you said? Okay, I don't know if that's what you said, but that's what I thought you said. Lisa, would you like me to repeat the question?
What reforms we make to our government, is that what the?
What reforms should we be exploring locally to make sure our democracy is more representative and ensures voters feel their participation actually matters?
Well, that's a very interesting question, right off the top of my head. California is one of the most progressive states in the union with respect to voting rights. It's probably easier to vote in California than, 49 to 50 of the other states. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot once you're registered. You don't have to ask for it. Many other states, you only get a mail-in ballot if you have an excuse. And many people don't have the right kind of excuse. We make sure that as many eligible people actually have their vote counted by, if your signature happens not to match, if the signature on your mail-in ballot doesn't match the one on when you register to vote, first an optical scanner looks at it, and then 4 different election workers, trained election workers will look at it to decide whether it's finally not a match. If you all agree it's not a match, then California is required to send you a notice, a letter, call you up or text you, and let you come and fix that. So they're doing their very best to make sure that every eligible voter's vote counts.
These are things I learned about today.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, if you had one wish to help improve voting rights, what would that be? And why? I added the why, by the way.
Well, my wish would be to have Congress pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It and a bill called the Freedom to Vote Act does many things besides clean up the mess that the Supreme Court left with us. But it also does things like encourage and allow public funding of elections. And that's a very important reason why there's a lot of misinformation pervade today. Here's Gail. So that's another proposition that's going to be on the ballot is Prop 4 on the California ballot, which will, if it passes, allow cities and counties in California to use public financing for their elections. There's such an incredible amount of money that that's poured into elections, which is that together with the social media can really distort information to the voters, and so they have a difficult time figuring out what is true and what is false. So those are the things that I would wish for.
Okay, I'd like for you to talk to me like I'm a 2-year-old. Talk to me about what it means, public funding for elections. Does that mean if I'm running, I can get support? What does that mean specifically?
Well, it depends on the particular program that the city enacts, but it provides for some public funds to go towards candidates, say in a city council election, if they agree not to spend more than a certain amount of money. Mountain View's is a perfect example. People agree to spend, I think it's not more than $27,000 on the race. They then get free publicity from the city of Mountain View. Mountain View also has a limit on the amount of campaign contributions, which is much lower than the state level, which is now $50,000. So those are it would enable more people who don't have access to a lot of money, rich friends, or the ability to fundraise from rich people, to run for office. It would
It opens the doors for people from historically excluded populations.
It would open
is
the
what I hear
doors,
you say.
exactly. It would open the doors for many more people to run who have interest in doing so.
Well, welcome, Gail. We're happy to have you here, my
Thank
friend.
you.
And I have a question for you, and it is, how can we affect change in states like Alabama and Georgia and North Carolina, right here from California?
There's a lot of feedback.
No, I'm working on it, sorry.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep it a little bit. Hi, I'm Gail Slocum. I'm a former mayor of Menlo Park. I'm a member of a Italian congregation, and I'm also a veteran election protection attorney. I actually, by day, I do normal law that's related to climate change. But for many years, I've been involved in campaigns where there's a time that we have to spend time focusing not just on our area, but on other areas where there's something that's at stake, that's going to be happening that has a risk to people being able to exercise their right to vote, where there might be vote suppression, where there might be interference with the voting process. And I've done that often through the ACLU, and what it can involve is, here's a little moniker that I've heard is, this year, for this midterm, there are very, very key races in key states, and some of those states do allow non-residents, non-voters inside of that state to actually come and volunteer to do poll observing or to do ballot monitoring after the ballots are sent to the county to be counted, because of concerns about potential interference, maybe by uniformed ICE officers potentially, or by other means of trying to, where there's going to be a very narrow margin, trying to suppress the votes, to prevent people from coming and voting. The states that are most at risk this year goes by the moniker MOTING, and there's two M's, Maine and Michigan. The O is Ohio. The A is Alaska. T is Texas. I is Iowa. N is North Carolina. And G is Georgia. And in 2024, I actually went to Atlanta, Georgia, for a month of the early voting.
Yeah.
And I did this at a poll observing station. I was certified to go and be a poll observer. You don't have to be a lawyer to do it. You can be trained, and that's going to be happening. But there's going to be lots of opportunities also to influence what's happening in those states from here if you can't travel. So what I would say is that the key opportunities to do something from here is working on situations where there's been voter roll purges, where certain names have been taken off the voter rolls, and we're trying to make sure those people are notified, to check their registration, to make sure that that they know where to vote and that they know that they can vote. And that can be done here by phone banking, text banking, and by letters. I think that's Vote Riders that is working on that, as well as the organizations that have an election protection coalition. And so I'll just give you one word that you can take with you if you want to look up Hands Off Our Vote. Hands Off Our Vote is in coalition with a bunch of nonprofits that are working on election protection, and you can find out there how to plug in. You can put your name, you can sign up. There's also the electionprotection.org. So I hope that answers your
It
question.
does. Thank you so much.
But
Okay.
I do think there is a racial aspect to this. When I was in,
There's definitely a racial aspect.
when I saw it in my own eyes when I was in Palm Beach County, Florida in 2004 doing election protection, and there was someone there who was challenging everybody whose skin was any browner than mine. I mean, literally. Including a woman who was carrying a 2.5-year-old toddler who had been waiting in line for 8 hours. Okay? So it does come down to us making sure that everybody knows that we're helping protect their right to vote.
Okay, so we got about 10 questions. I'm gonna ask you to give me 15 to 30-second responses because I'd like to get through all of them. That is our charge. Whoever wants to take it and whoever goes first, that's who's gonna get it. How do I best explain that asking for ID is actually voter suppression? Anyone? 30 seconds.
The state of California and most states that don't require a voter ID to vote do require voter ID when you register to vote. And at that point, voter identities are matched with other government databases. We know who these people are. We have already confirmed their identities when they come to vote or when they send in a mail-in ballot. Voter ID at the polls is simply a bureaucratic barrier with the intent of suppressing people who've already been shown to be eligible to vote. It's pure and simple.
I'm gonna double click on that and say, in the movie we learned that people of color are less likely to have IDs. That's why it's for suppression.
Well, also, some states are having a definition of ID that's way more restrictive than what we think of just as a driver's license. And like passports, for example, only half of Americans have a passport.
Okay,
It
the next
costs money.
question. Why does voter suppression tilt progressives much harder than conservatives? You wanna take that, Gail?
Yeah, voter suppression pretty much goes in one direction every election that I volunteered in. And so you can be going with a nonpartisan group, but the people that are gonna be trying to suppress the vote are usually the Republicans. And I think part of it is that the alignment of voters is often such that if they can make it fearful for people, like this year, for example, having the threats of
Georgia.
potentially ICE coming or whatever, there are people who would stay away because they're afraid, they just don't want to get into it with the man, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think that it has to do with these historical patterns that you probably saw in the movie, but in the history of the voting rights is such a long history and it's not over.
Yeah, and that leads us to our next question. Remember, about 30 seconds if you don't mind. And this is gonna go to Dr. Carson. What are conservatives so afraid of if more people vote?
I think that's pretty obvious. It's, I mean, not to answer the question directly, but I try to go back to Selma as many times as I can. Spend a lot of time visiting there, and in a way, that crossing the bridge is something that now thousands of people have experienced. And every year, in fact, I've taken my Stanford students, I've taken other groups to march across the bridge. And one year we had, I think it was 50,000 people marching across the bridge.
Amazing.
But that was to keep that spirit alive, and I think that they have been doing that every single year. And I think the real heroes are people like Joan Bland who tell her story to each generation of what it was really like.
Okay. My dad was an attorney and a judge, so I know giving them a time limit doesn't work very well. But I'm gonna okay. How best and who best can fight SCOTUS up 2013 decision? How do we overturn it?
Well, in California, they're trying to overturn it by passing the Voting Rights Act that applies to California. Maybe other states have to do the same thing. The other way is Supreme Court reform.
Yes.
There's been proposals to put 18-year term limits on Supreme Court justices so that it's not such a partisan selection process. Each president would have the opportunity to select 2 Supreme Court justices. There have been suggestions that the Supreme Court be subject to ethics oversight, just like all the other federal agencies. And these actually have been crafted into bills. I don't know how far they've gone, but I think there's bipartisan support for that sort of thing. Right now, the Supreme Court justices have a code of ethics, but there's no enforcement mechanism. There's no outside person or committee who says, okay, Mr. Or Ms.
Thank you. Whoever it is over here. Thank you.
You know, your spouse has flown a flag upside down and then outside your house, and now you're going to be making a decision on whether there's been some violation of the Voting Rights Act.
Yes. Okay, so the next question is, what's the origin of Prop 39 in California? How did it get on the ballot anyway? Who's funding it? And why now?
Why now? It's, who's funding it? We should be able to figure that one out. Well, it was put up by some Republicans who are actually trying to carry out the president's campaign of lies concerning non-citizen voting and voter impersonation. Why did it get, who's funding it? Where's the money come from? For that, you're gonna have to go to the various research groups, or the Secretary of State's office will also have, somebody
Go ahead.
knows that exactly. Okay, who's funding?
Who's funding it?
Well, you're gonna love the first one. Nicole Shanahan, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Vice President. Venture capitalist Douglas Leone. Twin investors, I can't read. I probably need to read this. The first one was Nicole Shanahan, who is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s vice presidential candidate. Venture capitalist Douglas Leone, twin investors Cameron and Tyler, oh my God, Winklevoss. Investor Aubrey Shernick. His wife,
The list is on Google and we can all look that up.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can send it.
Thank you, that's great.
5 minutes.
Yes, I know. Gotcha. Okay, why do you think 61% of registered voters did not vote in the June primary?
Well, it's very common for not all of voters to vote. And actually, I heard a speech that Kamala Harris gave just recently at the Urban League, talking about that the most important kind of election protection that we can do is to get everybody out to vote. An overwhelming turnout would be hard for them to try to wish it away, to try to say that there's this or that defect. And I wanted to kind of go back to the point about why, does the system have the, what was that question, 2 questions before that you gave? Okay. Anyway, my point is that, you know, we don't necessarily want to be in a country where it's like 99% people vote and they all vote for the same guy.
Yeah.
Right? So like turnout is not in and of itself a good thing, but it is in this country the way elections are held now. Really the key, it goes back to this idea that don't be afraid of the people voting, because the people, they know what their lived experiences, they know what gas prices are, they know what grocery prices are, they know what issues are important to them.
Thank you, Gil. Let's give our panel a hand for all the knowledge they're sharing with us. I also want to thank our sponsors, everyone that was a part of this, and the coalitions that supported it. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I am going to leave you with the charge. And of course, I want to thank all of you. You're amazing, amazing. We really appreciate your time, your insight, the thoughtfulness that you shared here today. And my question is, for all of you here, because your presence does matter, I'm going to leave you with a question. What is one commitment you are willing to make to strengthen and protect the freedom of the vote? I'm going to ask you to go out and make sure you do something, whether it means volunteering to work at a poll. Maybe it means translation at the poll. Maybe it means taking your two neighbors with you to vote. But I'm asking you today to decide how you're going to lean in and be a part of the shift. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to close us out.
I want to especially thank Illy. Sorry, I'm having to lean over here, I'm very short. I especially want to thank Illy for her time today and the professionalism and the organization she brought to this program. So much work happens. Lisa Ratner is an amazing president of the league. She's incredibly well informed. Yes, we need to worship her because we cannot lose her. But we also need to continue to fill our stable with people who are interested and passionate about this. And that's what the league is about, and it has been around for over 100 years. When women first got the right to vote, this was the group that started helping them figure out what to do with it. So what to do with the vote, how to protect it, that's our thing. And we share that with every group that's on this list. It was Alpha Kappa Alpha who I worked with on an event 2 years ago who approached us and said, hey, we want to do something about the election season, and that led to today. That was an email from Levita Johnson I had never met. I went to dinner with Illy. I told her about it. Oh, you have a question. I told her about it. She said, can I help? So if I can do this, you guys can do so much more. So join the league, get on our mailing list. It's on our website. We'll keep you informed. We'll try to send out some information to everyone who registered. A lot of you didn't, but if you're willing to share your emails, I don't do much with them because frankly I'm a busy person. I don't have time to do much with them, except keep you informed. And one of the questions that did come up was about the film.
The film.
And the availability of the film. Many people, actually we got 4 or 5 cards on that. The film that you saw today is one of several made by Mulholland. His mother, Joan Trumpauer, was a freedom rider. And so they have a family foundation. They have several films. You may have seen them in schoolrooms, perhaps PBS. If you'd like to view them for free, you can pay $3.99 to him on his website. But if you'd like to view them for free and you have a library card, you can see them on canopy.com. That's Canopy with a K, not C, which go there too and make a donation to plant trees in our town. But canopy.com has a lot of free films. It's great to educate yourself and other folks with your group, and if you want any tips on how we put this event together for your own group, happy to share them with you, because there are a couple of things we learned, like audio. Thank you, Amy, she's our executive director here, and she's absolutely amazing. Thank you to our speakers, thank you to our collaborators. I have a small parting gift for you. If your name is on the slide or you spoke today, there'll be a little something for you at the door. Thank you to everyone who's come today, and if you have further questions, pop them to us through the league website, stay in touch with us, and we'll do our best to keep you informed. Thank you.
I'll be here if anyone wants to talk about election protection, what you can make your plan.
Yeah, and there is a sign-up sheet if you're interested in having a neighborhood, let's have your ballot meeting. Legal help you put together a kit. Tell your neighbors and friends about Prop 39.